So we've done the Jack-in-the-Box box, we've done the Jack-in-the-Box guy, the crank, all this kind of good stuff. So now let's take a look at the candle. The candle is pretty easy. It's just a cylinder, right? And it's just done in 1-point perspective. So it's got 1, 2, 3 layers to it though. And those will all change a little bit in perspective, and that's what's going to make it look really natural. You know, like this one here. I think that looks pretty natural. Okay, so what would we go about doing? First thing we're going to do is go ahead and draw out a cube, right? If we've got a cube, or at least a square, I should say, then we can get our perspective on there. Square. Okay, so anyways, here is the bottom of it, and so here is our horizon line, and I'm just drawing a vanishing point back to here. That's not the central point. The central point's over here. It's just in line. I'm just making it in line with this. I don't have to have that central vanishing point. So I'm just going to go, you know, from here straight back, straight back. I'm going to find my edge here. So here's my vanishing point over here. Here's this leading corner right over here where those things intersect. I know that that's the end of my square. Cool. So there's my square. And so this isn't, you know, I'd said cube before. It's not really a cube. It's a box. So I can just say like, well, okay, how tall am I going to make this? Well, I'll make the candle overall about this tall right here. And this is totally arbitrary. It's just what I decided to do. So here's that. Here's this. And I feel like I should draw this a little bit darker so you can really see it. So here, you know, none of these lines are going to last though. Of course, I'm going to get rid of all of them. But I've got that, and it's going back to my vanishing point. Okay, this of course is also going to go back to my vanishing point. Okay, so that's this right here. And just going to go straight up. And so there's the overall cube that's going to contain that candle. But remember I said there was 3 layers to it. There's sort of the bottom layer, there's this middle layer, and then there's the top one. So once again, this is just arbitrary. I decided to come down to about here. Now don't let this get confusing because it's about the same level as the back of this, but that has nothing to do with it. It's just arbitrary that that's where that happened to be. I'll go back to here. If anything, it's kind of cool just because it gives me less lines to erase. And that goes from here to the back. Well, it just reuses that same line. Kind of nice, actually. Okay, all good. So then I just have to make my circles in here. And once again, you could just freehand it. You could just kind of go for it. Otherwise, you know what to do. You're gonna find the measured center. So we'll go here. We're going to measure it, which happens to be, where did I have it? Right about here, right? So here. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay. So I've got that as my measured center. I can just go like this and like this. And that's pretty good already. If I wanted to take it even further, I could just find the center here, divide that into my different points. Draw that, that. In other words, just clipping off the corners, and you know, I practically have a circle drawn for me already. Very easy, just round that off. Cool. So there's my bottom of my candle. Okay. And so I'll just darken the leading edge just so you can see that one. Okay. So the middle exact same thing, right? I just have to find the measured center, right? And yes, it happens to be boom, boom, right there, you know, because I've cheated. I've already got this all worked out underneath. But there it is. So same thing, you know, I can just sit here. And actually, you know, I can take all these same measurements from before and just clip that off, etc., etc. And, you know, once again, it's practically made the oval for me. Just draw up here, and you can see, I'll make this nice and dark here. You could see how that is making that first layer. Now up top, I'll go ahead and once again find that measured center. Go like that. See, and all these things are lined up really nicely. I don't even have to make new points. I could mess around with all that, but you know what? I'm not going to. I'm just going to draw a nice little flat little oval right in here. And there it is. So I got 1, 2, 3, and you can really see, this is kind of cool actually, you know, you can see how skinny that oval got up here relative to here, right? But that's what's really going to make things look realistic. Okay. So what could I do? Well, you know, so I could say like, okay, here's the top of my candle, right? And it's going to be melted down a little bit right there, right? And see, come around here, that's my second layer, right? Maybe this one's going to be up top, see, nice and narrow up here, and there it is, and giving me that nice melty candle here. Let me do some erasing so you can really see this a little bit better now. Okay, so here's my candle. It's a little bit clearer now. You can still see some of the remnants of all the guidelines that I made. So then I made sort of an erased inner wick right here. So, you know, let's see here. So if I found the center, the perspective center this time, not the measured one, just like I've always done, just by drawing my X. Okay, so that's the center of this thing. I'll say like, okay, the wick, we'll just draw the wick. Maybe up here, draw a little, just fake in a little shape right here. You know, it's going to be sort of circular, right? Going to kind of mound up a little bit. And so then that's giving me where that little raised area is. The daisies were really easy. You know, first thing I did is, well, I looked at a picture of daisies to make sure that I knew what daisies looked like. And so to do those, I said, okay, I'm going to have a daisy here. So there's that inner sort of circle of the daisy. And then, you know, all those petals are going to kind of create a ring around it. And I wanted that to feel like it was pushed up against here a little bit, maybe, you know, and having some weight on it as it came down here. So when I drew my ring, see, kind of made it and then kind of folded it a little bit and around a little bit. And that way it gives me a guideline to put all those petals. When I was making the petals, here, let me erase some of this inner stuff that we don't need to see. So then when I was making my petals, I'd be like, okay, well, here's one petal. See how it fits into that ring? Here's another one. And look at how I'm going to make the angle a little bit different so that it's following how I'd say that it's, you know, coming down and hitting down a little bit against the bottom here, having a little bit of weight on it. And then watch this. The next thing I'll do is I'll just go straight across. Okay, so here's another petal. Maybe it's a little bit foreshortened. Here's another one. And by doing this, then I can get my petals sort of evenly spaced and give it a nice round look. See how I've got that? I'm just going in between and in between and in between. You see how those are going around that circle really nicely that way. Okay, so from there I could maybe fill in here. Here's another one here. Here's maybe two more. Two more. Two more. Two more. Or if it really didn't fit, just one more, who knows? Two more. Two more. And two more. And you can see how that's really sort of evenly distributed those around there. Okay, like I said, I'd looked at a daisy, so I kind of know how a daisy goes. And the stem is pretty sparse. The leaves are kind of just very thin on one. You know, I mean, I've drawn 1,000,005 roses, but I haven't drawn that many daisies. So looking one up is a good idea, you know. And then just thinking how it flows. Now, here's something that we haven't really touched on much, but it's part of composition. And that is, if you want to make a composition that is very static, very staid, very conservative and solid, then, you know, just make everything very horizontal, maybe very vertical. If you want things to be more dynamic, then you want to make things more diagonal. You see how that's working on a diagonal plane this way? Okay, and then the daisies too, the stem this way. How one thing flows out of another. All those diagonals, okay. That's what's going to give it some sort of emphasis. And like I said, I'm going to make this one maybe so it's sort of halfway falling apart, you know. Maybe this one's like fully dead. And the way that I've arranged these two so that they come around like this, you know, that's the dynamic nature, it's movement in your artwork. Even the fact, you know, I played with this sort of crank right here, and I just found it better to come back this way. You see how it makes another diagonal, things lining up. And even things like, you know, the way that the flame is right below his face, that leads to another thing. Okay. And this one's short enough. Let's sort of talk about shading in this one, and then that will be the end of our little discussion of this drawing, right? Is that when I shaded it, you can see I made an arc around here, or an arch, I should say, of light, all around this central flame right here. And so once again, going from darker to lighter in a nice gradation. And by this point, you should be pretty good at shading because hopefully you've been doing this on all the drawings, trying to predict where the shadows are going to be. Remember, and those goes back to the very first drawings lessons that we had at the beginning of the year, saying like, okay, light travels in a straight line. Here's my light. And it's sort of an omnidirectional light, meaning it goes everywhere, right? So light's going to be coming here. So it's going to be illuminating this area here, okay? But these areas behind that are going to be more in shadow, and things are going to cast shadows. And you know, maybe more of this should have been darker, but it's sort of an artistic choice. I wanted the contrast between this dark shadow here and here. I felt that that would give it more three-dimensionality. But I'm still kind of following, you know, the rules as best as I can, keeping it lighter here, darker shadow here. You see how the hand casts a shadow to here, right? How this side here is more illuminated, and then this side goes back off into shadow. And even the direction that I'm shading it, following the long sections of here to give it more of a sense of being made out of wood and having some depth, and it's a little bit less shaded here than how it is way back here. The shininess here, just bring that sort of that darker area here, and the reflecting of the light, giving that a shinier thing. I didn't bother with trying to, let's say, reflect the flowers. I think that it was just stronger to leave it like this, but you'll see that there is, you know, some use of erasing in here to get that sort of effect. In the light itself, you know, giving it some halo of darkness around this inner core of light. I did that in order to get contrast, to really bring this center out. You can see the erased away areas around the candle here to give it that center, I should say, that feeling of the light hitting the edges here, but also the trying to recreate that sort of translucent quality of the wax when it's lit in a candle, if that makes sense to you. And so all this stuff, man, you gotta see things. You gotta draw a real candle. Don't light your house on fire, but light a candle in a dark room and draw it. You'd probably get a much better candle than my little imagination drew here. Okay, and so even though we've got shadows here, remember this is an omnipresent light, so it's going to be casting shadows this way too. So I have the shadow of the candle itself, of the flowers here, everything coming away from that light, and that's giving me the light. The table, using my landscaper's trick of making it darker here, lighter towards the back, gives me a sense of depth. Just a little bit of sort of judicious line work in here to give me some sense of texture into it. And then here's a big one, right? Is that some lines coming this way, vertically, off the edge of things, will give me a little bit of a sense of reflection. And that's all it takes. I mean, reflections, man, people go nuts for reflections. And they're usually not all that hard to do. Just some little indication, some sort of sense, and their own imaginations will pick that up. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed this drawing. There was a lot to it. I've got, for you real wizards out there, I've got one more out there, and that's how do you make something tumble? Because, everything so far has been pretty much just like there, solid, up and down, right? But how do you do like something that's tumbling and turning in space? That's just crazy. It really is crazy. We're going to go really far down the rabbit hole in the next one. So I do hope that you'll stick with me, and I hope that you're enjoying it.